There's a moment in every conversation when words decide who leads and who follows. It's not about titles or job descriptions. It's about presence. Picture a dimly lit Roman courtyard 2,000 years ago. A young orator stands before Marcus Aurelius, trembling. He begins to speak, but his voice falters, his words uncertain. The emperor listens silently, then says, "Let your words be firm as your purpose." Leadership, after all, begins not in command, but in composure. This art, the art of speaking like a leader, has less to do with volume and more to do with vision. And the Stoics, those calm architects of the inner world, knew this better than anyone. Stoicism, born in the bustling markets of ancient Athens, wasn't philosophy for dreamers. It was philosophy for doers. Its great teachers, Zeno, Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, taught that strength of speech comes from strength of thought. They believed that words are the echoes of the soul. If the soul trembles, so will the voice. "No man is free who is not master of himself," wrote Epictetus, reminding us that leadership begins with self-mastery. Stoicism taught people to stand like mountains amid storms, not untouched by emotion, but unbroken by it. In a world that constantly tests your resolve, the Stoics remind us, before you lead others, you must first lead your own mind. Today, the world still rewards the calm, the clear, and the confident. In offices, boardrooms, and digital spaces, we meet echoes of those old Roman forums. The question is no longer about surviving the storm, but about speaking through it. How does one speak with authority without arrogance, with calm without coldness? How can the ancient wisdom of Stoic philosophy be shaped into a modern voice of leadership, a voice that moves people not by fear or force, but by conviction? That's the question worth exploring next. If this idea struck a chord, if you felt even a spark of that ancient Stoic fire within you, don't let it fade. Subscribe to stay in the circle where modern minds meet timeless wisdom. Like this, if you believe leadership begins in the silence before you speak. And drop a comment below. Tell me what your Marcus Aurelius moment was, that instant when you realized words can steady or shake a room. Your story might just be the spark that lights someone else's calm. Number 1. Start strong and decisive. Imagine walking into a room where every conversation feels like a battlefield of words. Some voices stumble, some fade, but one voice, calm and steady, cuts through the noise. That's the voice people follow. Leadership begins not when you speak, but in how you begin to speak. The Stoics knew this well. Seneca once said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." The same goes, for speech authority isn't born in the moment, it's built long before it. A leader's first words don't just fill silence, they command it. When you start strong, your confidence sets the rhythm, your tone writes the story, and your audience decides, almost unconsciously, that they can trust you. The Stoics understood that decisiveness wasn't about rushing, it was about clarity. Epictetus taught that hesitation often comes from confusion about one's values. When you know what you stand for, your words stop wandering. Think of the old sailor in the harbor of Athens who refused to set sail until the winds were right, not because he feared the storm, but because he respected it. That's Stoic speech, timing, precision, and purpose. In leadership, pauses carry as much weight as sentences. Speaking like a leader means your silence is not uncertainty, it's gravity. A leader's speech also carries an unshakable sense of calm. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire under siege, wrote in his journal, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." Picture that. The storm rages, but the rock does not shout back. Leaders who speak with composure draw strength not from volume, but from presence. Think of the village elder in old stories who speaks slowly, thoughtfully, while the crowd leans closer, not because his voice is loud, but because his words are rare. In every era, power belongs to the one who doesn't need to prove it. To speak like a leader, one must first learn to think, feel, and act like one. True leadership speech is the sound of inner order of a mind that has wrestled with doubt and found balance. The Stoics remind us that every word is a reflection of the inner world that shaped it. When thought, emotion, and intention align, speech becomes more than communication. It becomes conviction. In the end, to speak like a leader is to let your words carry the weight of your calm, your courage, and your quiet certainty. Number 2, purposeful silence. Walk into any scene that matters, a boardroom, a family table, a crowded street corner, and you'll notice how silence can bend attention like a spotlight. Purposeful silence is not emptiness. It is a shape you give to a conversation. As a psychologist and teacher, I watch people who rush to fill quiet with noise, and I watch others who use silence like a hinge. One pause, and the room leans in. The Stoics treated silence as a tool of the mind, not withdrawal, but concentration. Seneca's insistence on preparation. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, reads here like a quiet ritual before speech. The leader sets the stage inwardly so the first word lands with weight. Silence sharpens listening. The Stoics prized precise judgment, and precise judgment begins with hearing. Epictetus reminded students that great actions grow from careful practice. No great thing is created suddenly, and that includes the art of speaking. When you listen first, your words no longer echo habit, they answer the moment. Think of an old village storyteller who listens to the crowd's tiny movements before he begins. His pauses are not emptiness, but maps showing him where people are ready to be moved. That kind of listening lets a leader's voice become measured, targeted, and unexpectedly persuasive. Silence also signals authority without force. Marcus Aurelius counseled living rightly rather than declaiming it. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. The leader who remains calm under pressure models the very steadiness listeners crave. In practice, that silence looks like a steady gaze after a hard question, a deliberate pause when tempers flare, or a withheld rebuttal that lets facts reveal themselves. Folktales carry this lesson. The shepherd who says little but whose flock follows him across cliffs because people trust the steadiness behind the silence. In human terms, restraint in speech builds credibility faster than any loud proclamation. Finally, purposeful silence is practice and habit. It is trained through small rituals, drafting your opening line, rehearsing a pause, holding back a habitual complaint. Stoic training, daily reflection, role-playing difficult conversations, rehearsing ethical choices turns silence into an instrument of character. When inner order is practiced, silence stops being awkward and becomes eloquent. It announces deliberation, invites respect, and clears space for the right word to do its work. Speak less, shape more, and let the quiet you cultivate carry the authority you want to project. Number 3. Using results-oriented sentences. There's a kind of speech that moves people, not because it's loud, but because it points forward. Leaders don't get lost in the fog of explanation. They build bridges with words that show what happens next. The Stoics, those ancient masters of discipline and direction, understood that the worth of words lies in their power to shape outcomes. In Roman forums, generals and philosophers spoke not to impress, but to instruct reality. When Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one," he wasn't just making a statement, he was issuing a call to action. The Stoics believed speech should move the mind the way an arrow moves through air, fast, straight, and with purpose. In leadership, every sentence you utter either builds motion or stalls it. Employees often speak to describe. Leaders speak to decide. The Stoics would call this the difference between rhetoric and reasoned purpose. Imagine a craftsman in ancient Athens explaining his plan to an apprentice. He doesn't say, "We might try this, but we carve here." The difference is subtle but magnetic. Seneca taught that clarity is mercy. If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. In speech, clarity of direction turns uncertainty into confidence. Each sentence should leave no doubt about where the listener is meant to go next. There's an old folktale about a chieftain who led his people across a frozen river. His men hesitated, whispering about the cracking ice. The chieftain didn't shout or lecture. He simply said, "Follow the sound of my steps." Then he walked, steady, deliberate, unshaken. Every word a leader speaks should sound like those steps, guiding, decisive, and alive with forward motion. A results-oriented sentence doesn't dwell on what might happen. It declares what will. It converts uncertainty into movement, and movement into trust. To speak like a leader, then, is to think like a builder. Every phrase must carry weight and direction. Stoic communication is a discipline of intent. You speak to move the world, not just describe it. Your words must outline the path, define the stakes, and make people feel the next step is not just possible, but inevitable. In the end, results-oriented speech isn't about control or authority. It's about clarity of vision. When a leader speaks with purpose, the words don't just end in sound, they end in action. Number 4. Positive and powerful sentences. There's a special kind of energy in the way true leaders speak. Their words don't just explain, they ignite. They shape the air around them, turning hesitation into hope and confusion into direction. The Stoics, those ancient craftsmen of thought, knew the force of language well. To them, speech wasn't decoration, it was discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." A leader understands that words are not merely sounds, they are seeds, and what you plant grows in the minds of others. When you speak with strength and optimism, you set the emotional climate of every room you enter. Stoic philosophy taught that language should not mirror chaos, but order. Seneca advised his students to speak as one whose words are deeds, meaning every sentence should stand firm, clear, composed, and directed toward the good. Leaders use positive, forward-moving sentences not because they deny difficulty, but because they refuse to be ruled by it. Think of an old blacksmith shaping iron in fire. Every strike is deliberate, every spark meaningful. Likewise, when leaders choose their words, they strike with intention. We will find a way. Let's move forward. We can make this work. These are not just hopeful phrases. They are small, steady acts of leadership. Across cultures, stories echo this truth. In a small coastal village, an elder once calmed his frightened people during a storm by saying, "The wind is strong tonight, but so are we." He didn't lie about the storm, he redefined it. That is what Stoic communication does. It reframes reality with courage and clarity. Epictetus often reminded his listeners that greatness lies in the attitude we bring to circumstance. When a leader speaks positively, they're not indulging in comfort, they're choosing direction. Words, used well, become the compass when the horizon disappears. To speak like a leader, one must treat language as both art and responsibility. Each phrase should lift, not weigh down, clarify, not confuse, build, not bruise. The Stoics remind us that speech reflects the state of the soul, and when the inner life is grounded in reason and hope, words emerge with quiet power. Positive and powerful sentences are not accidents. They are crafted from self-command, empathy, and purpose. In the end, leadership isn't only about making decisions, it's about using language that makes people believe in the road ahead. Number 5. Avoid unnecessary justifications and apologies. There's a quiet power in speaking without the need to defend every word. Leaders know when to explain, and when to simply stand. The Stoics, those masters of inner steadiness, believed that truth does not beg for approval. In the Roman Senate, when Marcus Aurelius was challenged by senators for a controversial decision, he didn't respond with excuses or self-defense. He simply said, "What I have done with reason." That calm certainty wasn't arrogance, it was clarity. True leadership speech carries this same posture, grounded, respectful, but never apologetic for acting with integrity. Stoic philosophy teaches that excessive justification is the mark of insecurity. Seneca once advised, "He who seeks approval of the crowd has already surrendered to it." The leader's voice, by contrast, does not chase validation, it invites understanding. Imagine a craftsman explaining his work. He doesn't waste words defending each cut of the chisel. His craft speaks for itself. In modern terms, this means removing the clutter from speech. "No, I'm sorry, but," or "I just thought maybe." Every time we over-explain, we dilute our own authority. A leader's words, like a clear bell, should ring once and echo confidently through the room. There's an old folk tale about a wise woman who was asked why she never defended her choices to the village. She smiled and said, "Because the sun does not explain why it rises, it simply rises." This is Stoic speech in action. The wise speak from reason and responsibility, not from fear of being misunderstood. When your intent is guided by principle, explanation becomes an act of teaching, not pleading. Epictetus told his students, "First learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak." Leaders don't apologize for existing in their convictions. They speak to illuminate, not to be excused. To speak like a leader, you must carry your words with quiet certainty. That doesn't mean refusing humility or correction. It means knowing the difference between accountability and insecurity. Stoic communication values composure over compliance, substance over noise. When your choices are rooted in thought and your words serve purpose, there's no need for excessive justification. Your presence speaks louder than any defense could. In the end, every strong sentence should sound like a decision made twice, once in the mind and once aloud, unshaken and complete. Number 6. Body language in line with words. Before a leader speaks, the room already listens, not to their words, but to their posture. The Stoics, who trained not only the mind but the bearing of the body, understood that authority begins long before the first sentence is spoken. In ancient Rome, students of philosophy practiced walking slowly, speaking deliberately, and holding their gaze with calm steadiness. It wasn't performance, it was discipline. Seneca wrote, "Let your manner be equal to your words." A leader's presence is an extension of their inner order. If the mind is scattered, the body reveals it. In contrast, when words and posture align, even silence becomes persuasive. Body language that supports speech tells the listener, "I believe what I'm saying." The Stoics often emphasized consistency between thought, action, and expression. Epictetus told his students that philosophy wasn't something you spoke about, it was something you embodied. When a leader's voice wavers but their eyes stay firm, when their hands rest rather than fidget, people feel steadiness, not tension. Picture a general addressing soldiers before battle. He doesn't shout to be heard. He stands in a way that makes others quiet down to listen. Leadership communication is never just verbal. It's a choreography of conviction. In a Greek folktale, a young philosopher once argued endlessly to prove his wisdom. His mentor finally said, "Your tongue speaks, but your shoulders disagree." The lesson still holds. The body betrays what the words pretend. The Stoics viewed self-mastery as harmony, the unity of movement, tone, and thought. Marcus Aurelius's composure under pressure wasn't merely mental strength. It was physical control, a stillness that calmed chaos. A leader's gestures, pauses, and posture can either reinforce authority or quietly unravel it. The body whispers truths the voice cannot hide. To speak like a leader, train the body to follow the message. Hold yourself with the ease of someone who trusts their own judgment. Breathe deeply, stand tall, look people in the eye, not to dominate, but to connect. Stoic presence is not stiffness, it's serenity with purpose. When your physical cues match your verbal intent, every word carries more gravity. In the end, leadership speech is not only heard, it's seen. The great Stoics would remind us that persuasion begins not with what leaves your lips, but with how you inhabit your stillness before you speak. If you've read this far, it means you're not just curious about speaking like a leader, you're serious about becoming one. The Stoics would have admired that kind of steady pursuit. Leadership isn't built overnight, and it isn't measured by how loudly you speak, but by the quiet consistency of your growth. So take these ideas, posture, tone, clarity, composure, and practice them in real conversations, not just in your head. Every sentence is a chance to train the mind, every silence a test of strength. Thank you for staying until the end. May your words carry calm authority, and may your presence remind others that true power needs no noise.